Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I'll Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. Today, it is time for another edition of Female First, which means we are once again thrilled to be joined by the awesome, the adventurous Yves. Welcome, Yves.
Thank you. I like adventurous. I
Yes,
feel good to be called that.
adventurous.
Like, I don't really get called that. So I appreciate that.
I would say you are. You've always got adventures to update us on.
You're a globetrotter.
What have you been up to, Yves?
I feel like managing a pretty good balance of like chilling and working and playing and being in community and being isolated at the same time. So I think last time I was on the show, I did talk about how I was in Seattle at the time, and I had a really good time there. And I really enjoyed being outdoors there. I really enjoyed being in the city, and I definitely plan on going back at some point sooner rather than later. Other than that, I've been hanging out.
Yeah. Still, I feel like every time you've earned the label adventurous, Yves. That's what I'll say.
Thank you.
You're up to things and traveling about. Here's a question. I kind of half know the answer to this, I think. Were you ever into sports as a kid, Yves?
I was. And when I was younger, so I started in track when I was in middle school. So but it's interesting because my mother ran track when she was younger, and I think it was her who kind of was like, hey, Yves, you should, join track. But she never pressured me into it. So it wasn't a thing where it's like she forced me to do track because she did it and she wanted me to continue on her path. She wanted to live vicariously through me. It wasn't like that. I think she just kind of encouraged me to do it. And I pretty much still am. And I was then, okay. If I'm willing to do it, then I'll do it. And if it feels right, then I'll do it. So I did do track, and I was actually pretty good at it, although I wanted to be a sprinter. And I think we might have talked about this. I wanted to be a sprinter. They wouldn't make me a sprinter. They put me right there on the cusp of sprinting. And I thought sprinters were so cool, and I still think sprinters are really cool. But, I wanted to be a 100 or 200 girly. Really, 200 felt a little bit more right. Because I don't know if I had the explosiveness to do 100 and do well at it. But 200, the curve in the 200 felt really good to me. Hurdles, no go. So I ended up being I tried long jump, not good at it. Not good at it. Wait, long jump, triple jump, two different things, right? I don't know. Mm-hmm. One of those I did. I tried. I wasn't good at it, so I'm just going to put that out of my head. And then I ended up in the 400, though. So that's where I ended up. I did pretty well at it, but I didn't stay in it long enough to I think if I stayed in it longer, I would have done even better. I didn't dedicate myself to it to could continue on a path of athletics in track specifically. And then after that, I did tennis for a couple of years because I liked being an athlete and I wanted to stay in athletics, and I liked tennis, but I didn't necessarily, it wasn't one of those things where I forecasted being some great. I wasn't ever an athlete. I want to be a professional athlete track, but it was like when I ended up being good at them, I was like, maybe there is something here. But I think, some people when they're younger, they start out like, I really love this thing. I really want to do it. I really want to climb the ranks in it. And if I would have started with that mindset, I think I could have ended up doing athletics in a more serious way.
Ooh. You could have had a whole different branching life.
Right. I think so, honestly. But it's funny because I still really like physicality, and I still really like having rigorous athletic and or just physical practices through the kinds of styles of yoga asana that I would do. So usually it's more on the vigorous side, and through powerlifting. I like things that really challenge me physically. And so I feel like I've still been able to, in a more leisurely way than professional athletics, be able to keep that in my life.
Yeah. That's great. I wish I'd kept up with a bunch of my stuff But once the pandemic came, which by the way, today is the quarantine anniversary, so happy quarantine anniversary, everybody.
I wasn't expecting that.
It's on my calendar every year. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember this.
Oh my God.
She has a whole meal prepped and everything.
No, is it a quarantine
I do
meal?
like a whole thing. I just go back.
How did I not know about this?
The last things I did that day, I do them again in memory.
Oh, that's kind of that's pretty poetic.
I'm a very big tradition person. I don't know quite why, but it helps me mark the passage of time, I think. So I'm like, okay, this is when I eat this meal. I remember this.
Fair.
And especially during the pandemic, that was useful because time. What
to say?
I was kind of similar to you, Yves, in terms of I liked playing sports. I was pretty good at some of them. But usually once somebody came to me and was like, do you want to compete professionally? I would always say no. And then I would quit. I don't know why I went to
after
quit.
They asked you?
I'm like, oh God, no. This is over.
You've noticed me. I must hide again.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, but I also played tennis. My dad really wanted me to be, I wouldn't say he pressured me, but he really wanted me to be into it. And I liked it, but I was never like, a lot of times I was like, why do I have to go do tennis right now? It's hot outside. But yeah, that's about where I was.
So you didn't enjoy it when you were doing it?
I enjoyed it when I played with my friends, but he signed me up for lessons and I didn't like the lessons. And a running theme throughout me playing sports was I've never wear the right clothes because I was such a nerd. I remember this very specifically. I was wearing a black Star Wars t-shirt that said, "Don't look back." And it had the picture of Darth Vader of the shadow. It was a horrible shirt to wear for exercise in the heat. Yeah. And so I didn't dress properly for it. And so a lot of it was like I was tired after school and I wasn't wearing the right thing. But when I played with my friends, I did really love it. That was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Samantha? Do you have any experiences?
No. So I was definitely... Actually, I cheerleaded, and I know that could be a debate about whether or not it's a sport. But we did like competitive stuff with dance and stunting, and I was always the base. So I was the one lifting and throwing people because I got those thick thighs. It helped me push people up. But with that, I did try tennis, and I'm bad at it. So bad that the first time that I tried to play with someone who was actually really good, and he was trying to help me, he walked off the court and said, "Don't do this to me," and walked away from me. And I was like,
"Don't do this to me." It was a personal offense.
It was like, he was so offended. I'm like, fair enough. Because it was not working. He was done. He was over it. So it was not my thing. I kind of wish we had other types because, again, I also was one of those that started working at like 13, 14. So I had to stop pretty much everything in order to like get things in order to do things. So I did that. So less sports, more working, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's about it. No, not very competitive. I'm very slow. I'm also very slow. Can't jump that high off the ground. But I can yell.
You can't jump. You don't need to have ups to be able to do a sport. But that's why you were the base, right?
That was why I was the base, because I was sturdy on that ground.
That makes sense. I mean, gravity does this thing for a reason.
And it kept me down. It's fine. I'm fine.
Yes. Blame gravity.
Yes.
Thank you.
I like that. Well, I am very excited to talk about the person you brought today, Yves. It's quite a wild story, and it's interesting to see how sports have changed so much. So who are we talking about today?
Yeah, actually, our conversation about tennis is pretty appropriate because we are talking about Ora Washington today. And she was the first Black woman to win 7 consecutive singles titles in the American Tennis Association. And also I've seen it put as like the first Black American woman sports celebrity. And we'll get into later, I think, some dig into that word celebrity. I mean, I feel like celebrity is already a loaded word, but the way that her legacy kind of panned out and how she was recognized during her time, I think maybe could have been uplifted a little bit more as a little teaser. But we can start a little bit earlier than that, where she was born. So she was born in the late 1890s. Not really clear exactly when she was born, but it might have been 1898 or 1899. And she was born on a family farm in Caroline County, Virginia. I think that's Caroline. Please, if somebody knows how to pronounce it, maybe it's Carolyn. I know sometimes place names have specific pronunciations, but as far as I know, Caroline County, Virginia. And her parents were James Thomas Washington and Laura Young Washington. And she was the fifth of 9 children. And they were part of a community of people who owned farmland. And according to a family member, tobacco was the family's biggest crop, but they also grew corn, wheat, and rye. And the way the family had it organized was kind of like the boys worked outside in the fields and the girls worked inside. And there's not a ton of information about this time in her life, but on the 1910 census, Ora is listed as being 12 years old, which would put her as having been born sometime around 1898. Now, we already have talked about many times on Female First how there's a lot of dubiousness around the dates that people were born, and people would not know themselves, and then people would make stuff up, and the census would be wrong. So, of course, making room for that. But that I think that gives us a general sense of around the age she was at this time. And by this point, her mom is already dead. Her mom died giving birth to the 9th sibling. And of course, it became hard for her dad to take care of everyone in the family farm and the family all on his own. So I'm not sure exactly what happened to all of the other siblings and the family, but it's clear that Ora moved to Germantown in Philadelphia and moved in with her Aunt Maddie sometime around the mid-1910s. And this is in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, is where her story with sports starts. So just for a little context, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, I'm sure y'all have talked about it on the show before, but with women in sports. But women, and particularly kind of more well-to-do white women who had luxury of time and luxury of resources, were encouraged to exercise. So middle and upper class women were forming athletic clubs. That's what they were spending their time doing exercise in these clubs. And at the same time, women who were more working class and Black women didn't have as much time and as much luxury to be involved in sports. Of course, exercise is kind of it's a constructed thing, because a lot of the time people were moving their bodies in the work that they were doing. They were spending time outside. So this is not to say, I don't want to make it seem like this is like, oh, white women and upper class people were the only people who were more healthier or who were more capable, of moving their bodies or doing sports. It wasn't like that. It was just like in this constructed way, and group participation and in participation to facilities and more resources like that. More middle to upper class people and non-Black people were the ones who were having those experiences. But at the same time, of course, people would recognize that, and it was being addressed. So there were organizations that aimed to help with these kinds of societal issues like poverty, and being able to give Black children and girls and women places where they could go to have similar experiences and exercise. And one of them was the Young Women's Christian Association, or YWCA, which has its own long history. But there was a Black YWCA in Germantown where Ora was. And that is where her story in sports starts. That's where she was given access to lessons, where she was able to learn more. And that now, it wasn't like she dropped everything and had ample and infinite time to participate in sports, because on the 1920 census, at least, and so during this entire time, essentially, she's still working. She's listed as one of 2 servants working in a wealthy white home in Philly. So she does do domestic work at this time to obviously help herself and probably her family as well. So it's not even clear how she got interested in tennis. Like, I haven't seen any of her own personal records, any of her personal narratives about, like, this is how I was inspired by somebody to get into tennis. This is who I saw playing. This is what I liked about tennis. There's not really much of that reflection that I have, that I am aware of, to go on. I don't think it really exists. It hasn't popped up yet, but there, is more information about her as she becomes more involved in sports. There's just not a lot of personal information about her personal life and her own reflections about it. But it might have been sometime around 1923 when she first started playing in national Black women's competitions. There was an article that noted how she held the racket almost halfway up the handle, which is, of course, if you're familiar with tennis, and a more unusual way of handling the racket. Usually you hold it farther down. But in 1924, we're skipping a lot. So I just want to recognize that. I want to call that out because we're going to get right into how, like, when she started winning and she's actually playing now. It's kind of like we have to skip the whole the training montage because I don't know any of that. That information isn't available. But I am curious about what percentage of that was, and the lessons she got, what percentage of that was naturally came to her. So I did see noted in some of the articles about her, like, oh, she had natural talent. But I do think, I know y'all know, oftentimes in these articles about people, it's a little bit of inflation. There's a little bit of embellishment. So how I don't really know how a person can judge what is someone's natural talent versus what is someone's development through the skills that they gained and the lessons that they took. And I also don't want to diminish, the actual work that she put into it, especially considering I don't really know what she did to put the work into it. So, but she did start winning pretty early. In 1924, she won the city championship in Wilmington, Delaware, in women's singles and doubles and mixed doubles titles. And in 1925, she won the New York City and New York State championships. And notably, she beat Isadora Channels, who had won ATA national championships twice, and ATA as in the American Tennis Association. So I'll be saying ATA when they come up from now on. But she also, at that same year, won the women's doubles titles at the ATA. And the ATA was a national Black tennis organization that was founded in 1916, since Black folks were barred from playing against white folks. So this was a situation in where, as we'll continue to talk about later, Ora had to stay in the Black folks lane because she wasn't really competing against white people during this time because of segregation. So at the time, Ora would trade top spots with Isadora Channels and Lula Ballard, and she played doubles with Lula. And she had some difficulties beating them at nationals, and she would beat them at the state levels. But in July 1927, she won at the Pennsylvania Open, and she got that title again the next year. But during all this time, she was still having to work. So yes, she was getting more titles in the sports that she was playing, but she also had to continue working. And around the spring of 1929, she moved to Chicago. And when she was there, she worked as a domestic worker in a hotel for a couple of years. And she beat Frances Gittens in 1929. And that's when she got a women's national title. And that was the first of many more to come. And she continued to do well in the Black tennis realm. But in the off season, she turned to basketball. So basketball was kind of more, it was the thing that a lot of women played. And it was a little bit more easily accessible to Black women and to the working class. And it was like she would, in the warmer months, play in the spring and summer, play tennis. And then she was able to, in the fall and winter, play basketball. And so she had a real year-round sports practice. And in 1930, she joined the Germantown Hornets, which played at the local YWCA. and they were doing really well. So by March of 1931, they were up 14 games to 1 game. And Ora was usually the high scorer in the game. In the articles about her, they talk about, oh, Ora, she carried the team, basically. We were passing it to her. She was making the points. There was a lot of that. Like, Ora was a star on the team she was on. And the Hornets soon became a professional team. And they ended up playing other Black women's teams, so white women's teams, and sometimes they even play Black men's teams. But there was a big defeat in 1932, and that was against the Philadelphia Tribune girls, which was related to the Philadelphia Tribune. They sponsored, that's why they were called that, because the Philadelphia Tribune, which was a Black newspaper, did sponsor them. So they beat Ora when she was on the Hornets to win the national title after this really intense championship series of 5 games to determine who was going to be the Black women's champions. And Otto Briggs, who was the circulation director for the Philadelphia Tribune, got her to switch team and join the Tribunes as captain in the fall of 1932. So she wasn't even on Hornets that long. When they lost, she was like, okay, I'm good. I would love to know how that conversation went. But I wonder how much convincing it took her to switch teams. But it's a nice rivalry story, I feel like. And so then she switched over. She switched teams. And Ora did get a small salary for playing on the team, but she didn't earn enough to stop doing domestic work still. So as in many of the other stories we talk about on Female First, it's like, okay, yeah, we're talking about their accomplishments now in hindsight. And sometimes they got notoriety while they were alive. Sometimes they didn't get it until they were dead already. But oftentimes they weren't making money to match whatever kind of recognition they were getting at the time. And that was the case for Ora. She kept working. And at the same time, the team kept winning games. By January of 1933, they had won 11 consecutive games. The Philadelphia Tribunes did. And in the book, A Spectacular Leap by Jennifer H. Lansbury, the author says that Ora had great stamina and she had the ability to pass or shoot with either hand. So they were doing well. A lot of that was attributed to Ora, although it was definitely a team effort. In 1934, the Tribunes went on tour and they were doing their thing. And Ora herself, she was still on the tennis side as well. So we got this basketball thing going on. We're going back to tennis now. Back on that side, she lost the ATA singles title for the first time since she first won it in 1929. So she was winning for a while. But in 1937, she did win it again. However, she planned on retiring. So around 1938, she retired from her tennis singles career. However, she did plan to keep competing in doubles matches. Out of curiosity, do y'all prefer singles or doubles in tennis, whether that's playing or watching?
I preferred playing doubles. Most of the time I watch tennis at singles, but I don't know if that's a preference thing or if that's just how it has panned out for me in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really watch tennis. I'm just going to admit it. Like, if I were there live, and this is for all sports, I think for me, I would enjoy it, but watching it on TV is not my favorite. So the few clips that I've seen are those, like, because I like the person. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know much about, because I have recently watched the fact that they are now miking a lot of the competitors. So that's been interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Full disclosure.
No. Okay, yeah, I was asking because I know that Ora did both. So she did both singles and doubles. And when I played, they put me in doubles more. I think I just wasn't strong enough in tennis. Like, I wasn't strong. I wasn't strong as a tennis player enough in general. I had a lot more work I needed to do to get better. I was decent, but I think there was a marked just advantage that other players had over me because they started younger. I started in high school. And then there were the people who were like a little bit wealthier, you know, they were like upper middle class, and they had the ability to get tennis lessons starting from a young age. And I was just outclassed when I would go to compete a lot of the time. But I do know that if I would have been able to have more time and lessons, that I could have done better. But I enjoy watching singles a lot as well. I think when I watch tennis, I watch singles more. But I do really like playing doubles, and it's fun to have a partner on your side. You know, I don't know. But it's at this point in Ora's journey in tennis where she leaves singles behind, at least for the moment, and then keeps doing doubles matches. So back on the basketball side, in 1938, the Tribunes went on tour in the South again. This time they went to Orangeburg, South Carolina. They went to Atlanta, Biloxi, Mississippi, New Orleans, and the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama. And writer Rick Roberts wrote a feature on Ora in the Atlanta Daily World, and he said this: Miss Washington, unlike most females, affects the burden of national prominence with dignity and grace. She is wholly unaffected, has a most obliging and pleasing personality, and is a favorite of all her associates. So that was a pretty glowing, albeit, you know, a lot of outdated terminology. Outdated terminology, and clearly focused very heavily on her personality, which doesn't, I mean, it's part of a person, of course, but not sure how this is relevant to like her prowess in her sports playing. But yeah, she also didn't get her feedback about women in general in sports and about Ora wasn't always so ingratiating, because it was like women were kind of expected to still be more dainty, to still be more, you know, refined around the edges. And she didn't always fit that mold for everyone, but doesn't matter. She was winning, and they won a bunch of consecutive championship titles. And back on the tennis side, in 1939, because she was going back and forth between the two in a single year, in 1939, she came out of retirement just to play Flora Lomax, who was new, like hot on the scene. She was the ATA national champion. And Ora said this in a Baltimore Afro-American interview. She said, quote, "Certain people said certain things last year. They said Ora was not so good anymore. I had not planned to enter singles this year, but I just had to go up to Buffalo to prove somebody was wrong." And she did. She stood on her word, and she beat Flora. And she was just going to take a break from singles for a little bit. It seems like she kind of backed away from the whole retirement plan, was like, I'm going to take a break. But then she was injured in a basketball game in 1941, and she just completely retired from tennis singles. And she had been the only player to win national titles in the singles, doubles, and mixed doubles in the same year. And back to basketball, she was still doing that, and she was still captain for the Tribunes. But she, at that point, she didn't really play on the court much. And around 1942 or 1943, she left the Philadelphia Tribune Girls when it disbanded. And she did keep playing doubles. In 1947 is when she won her last mixed doubles title in the ATA, and she played with George Stewart for that match. And in the end, she had like 8 singles championships, 12 consecutive doubles titles, and 3 mixed doubles titles. And yeah, at this point, her varied career in basketball and in tennis kind of dwindles down. She, in the 1940s, bought a house in Philly with her younger sister and lived with her sister and her sister's husband and their brother. And she died on May 29th, 1971 in Philadelphia. She had a long career in both of those sports. She had really made a name for herself. And she had won the ATA doubles titles every year from 1925 to 1936. She had won the ATA women's singles titles every year from 1929 to 1935. And she had gained notoriety in those Black circles, but she didn't get rich and she didn't garner mainstream fame, which is how we were talking about in the beginning, kind of like what the word celebrity means. I mean, in our hindsight and our recognition of her, should consider her as a person who was really a pioneer in, one, being really skilled in tennis and skilled in basketball and helping take her teams to victory and being a highlight of the games, you know, being really proficient at what she did and also garnering attention in a lot of the Black press specifically. But she wasn't getting the attention that some of her white counterparts who were doing similar things in the white leagues were. So it was also in general just the landscape was shifting a lot because this was the early 1900s. So sports for everyone was changing a lot. Sports for women was especially changing a lot. And basketball, at first, the women were playing competitively and by similar rules that the men were playing. But at a certain point, women were expected to not be so quote unquote rough and competitive. And you'll see in some of those articles, people talk about, the team was good. They won, but like they were a little too rough. They weren't playing as sensitively as they expected women to play at the time, where it was more a participatory sport than a competitive and like physical sport as someone would expect basketball to be today. And she did, though, although at her time she got some feedback that was in that vein. Later, posthumously, she was inducted into many halls of fame. In 1976, she was inducted into the Black Athletes Hall of Fame. But there is a story about how, and I feel like it's called out because it's pretty indicative and symbolic of her legacy, is that at the ceremony for her being inducted into the Hall of Fame, they expected her to be there in 1976. But as we said, she died in May of 1971. So, of course, she wasn't going to be there, but they didn't know that. They didn't know that she had passed away already. They were ready to give her commemorative items, and they were on stage like, hey, we have all these things for you. And she didn't show up to get her award. Yeah, I know. It's kind of morbidly funny, right? She had died in such there had been little fanfare around her legacy around the time of her death. She had apparently been sick up until her time of death. So in her last year, she was already getting sick up until the time she died. And it just wasn't known, although, I do wonder about the backstory because somebody had to have done some research into her to know that she deserved this award. It makes me wonder what the vetting process is like. But she did deserve the award because she was a pioneer in the field. But yeah, that's a pretty weird story.
Yeah, I have so many questions.
Oh, yeah. Right?
I was just like, how do you not check to see if they're still alive?
Yeah, I don't know.
That seems like an obvious question.
Yeah. Because you're also wondering, how is she going to get there to the ceremony? Right. Is anybody bringing her? Did anybody reach out to her beforehand?
Yeah, did they send a letter, be like, hey, we're going to honor you? No one looked at it. So they're just like, obviously she said yes. No answer is a yes, right?
Yeah, it's an odd story.
Wow.
I can't explain it.
Still, hey, congratulations. She deserved the award.
Yeah, she did. And then later, and she was also inducted into other halls of fame. So in 2009, she was inducted into the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. In 2018, she was also inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in Springfield, Massachusetts. And historians have done more work to uncover parts of her life. I know historian Pamela Grundy is one person who has been doing the diligent work of looking up more details of what happened, more so of her personal life. And Ora's former teammates also later said that she was seen as less feminine than the other players. So you can go and look at pictures of Ora and pictures of her and the rest of her team as well. They talked about in the articles how she was 5'7", and despite her being 5'7", she was still really great at basketball and dominated on the court. But yeah, so y'all can see her as well. And her great nephew later on, his name is Gregory Price. He said in interviews that she was gay and that she was reclusive because of it. So that's also part of her story, but we don't really have her talking about that in her own words. So I think there was some like homophobia in the commentary surrounding her, maybe in more public forums of speculation around it, but there is no personal narrative. So, but her great nephew did comment on that. And then there is a podcast called BBC Untold Legends that tells her story. It's like 6 parts, and folks can go listen to it and hear more of what the historians and family members and teammates and like that, and people who were closer to her and knew more about her had to say. So there definitely was a recovery of her legacy, even though in 1976, people didn't even know she died. And the people who were honoring her didn't even know she died. So imagine what people who had never heard of Ora, it's like, I didn't even know about her, didn't know anything about her at all because the people who were honoring her didn't even know that she was gone. So yeah, that's Ora's story.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because I actually had heard about her before, but I knew the tennis part. I didn't know about the basketball part. That's wild. And, as a lot of interviews I was reading about her pointed out, it's so fascinating that, today athletes like Serena Williams make millions and have all these products with their name on it.
Mm-hmm.
And meanwhile, she's in basketball and tennis and winning all these awards and not getting paid much, if at all, and then kind of just being forgotten after she retired. It's interesting because we're still having conversations about, equal coverage of women's sports versus men's sports and equal pay, but that it's shifted so much to like, we're talking in millions now, whereas like, you know what I mean? It was interesting to hear this story and to think about all the things that have changed and all the things that still haven't.
Yeah, it is like she didn't get sponsorships. She wasn't paid a lot in her salary when she did get a salary when she was on the basketball team, which is a huge difference from how athletes, are able to navigate their compensation today. So yeah, at least according to her family members, that it seems like she wasn't sad, is what I think what Gregory Price said. Like, okay, she wasn't sad, and she was happy with her accomplishments. And at least according to them, it didn't seem like, and definitely not in interviews that she gave, it didn't seem like she was feeling so dejected about not having got those things at the time.
Yeah. For sure. But so many awards. It's amazing what she did accomplish. So thank you as always, Yves, for bringing this story to us. Where can the good listeners find you?
So everyone can find me at yvesjeffcoat.com. So you can just go there and find a lot of other things. That's spelled YVESJEFFCOAT.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there. If you want to go straight to Instagram, you can go to Not Apologizing. And you can also find me on many other episodes of Sminty talking about female first, accomplishments of women in history.
Yes. Go check all that stuff out, listeners, if you have not already. And you can find us in many ways. You can email us at hello@stuffwenevertoldyou.com. You can find us on Blue Sky at Mom Stuff Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff We Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store, and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff We Never Told You is a production by iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.